Madam Speaker, I shall start by looking at the state of the economy and at the solutions to the problems and threats du moment as proposed in the budget speech. In the budget speech, Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance painted a very rosy picture of the present state of the economy. He says therein that since the last elections, I quote, "the results speak for themselves. The economy," I quote, "is on stronger foundations. GDP growth is," I quote, "firmly on a rising trend." But let us look at the facts. Over the last 10 years, Madam Speaker, GDP growth averaged 3.7% per year, whereas it had grown by 4.3% per year over the 10 preceding years. In the budget speech, it is estimated to grow by 3.9% this year, in 2019. I do hope that this turns out to be the case. But going by the figures available since the beginning of the year, including tourism, I believe GDP growth will be slightly less than 3.7%. I believe that the GDP growth will be slightly less than 3.7% this year, in 2019. Inflation, true, remains subdued, due mainly to depressed prices of oil and commodities. The falling unemployment rate needs to be read in the context of the aging population. Thus, employment creation remains poor, and underemployment is significant, whilst the unemployment rate amongst the youth is more than 25%. The public debt worries everybody, including the International Monetary Fund. When all debt committed and not only disbursed, as well as all funds borrowed from the Indian Exim Bank and the China Exim Bank are included, the truth is that public debt exceeds 70% of GDP as at June 2019. Mr. Speaker, the budget deficit for 2019-2020 will be more than 5% of GDP when we include the special funds as well as all off-budget expenditure. What worries me most is the situation concerning the balance of trade, balance of the current account deficits, and the balance of payments. The balance of trade and the current account deficit are continuing to deteriorate. Exports are down and going down. The balance of payments surplus went down by nearly 50% in 2018 compared to 2017. Balance of payments deficits were recorded. Balance of payments deficit were recorded in the last 2 quarters of 2018. Foreign exchange reserves declined from 230 billion in June 2018 to 2018 billion in December 2018. As a result, Madam Speaker, any significant drop in capital inflows into the country would render the balance of payments, would harm the balance of payments itself. And I must say, whilst I was listening to Honorable Boda, the latest MCB focus reached me, and it's frightening, what I've just said. Especially this part on the external trade, external figures. If we look at it, all three figures, the balance of trade, just look at the figures, is going down still further this year, dramatically. The balance, the current account deficit as well. And the balance of the overall balance of payments, according to the MCB, and I think they are right. The overall balance of payments, which was more than 6% in 2017, went down in 2018 and is expected to 3.4%. And the figure is that the overall balance of payments for 2019 is going to be only 1.9%. What I had worked out disturbed me, but these latest figures are very, very disturbing. As worrying as the figures which I've just mentioned is the fact that the productive sectors of the economy, the sugar sector, the manufacturing sector, even tourism, and even the financial sector are all in trouble. I have to say, on the other hand, that the solutions proposed in the budget speech to the problems and threats I have just referred to are not serious. I'm talking about the economy. I'm talking about fundamentals. The solutions proposed are not serious at all and will not put Mauritius on a sustainable path. In regard to the public debt, and I'm going to come back now to go again now on this idea of the 18 billion rupees of the special reserve of the Bank of Mauritius. In regard to the public debt, the idea of using 18 billion rupees from the special reserve fund of the Bank of Mauritius is, according to me, both misguided and dangerous. The Prime Minister and Minister of Finance rightly explained Monday last, replying to a PNQ, that there are three things at the Bank of Mauritius that need to be kept separate. One, the foreign exchange reserves of the country. Two, the General Reserve Fund of the Bank of Mauritius, to which are allocated at the end of every financial year 15% of the profits, if any, of the Bank of Mauritius, the rest being transferred to government, to the consolidated fund, that is to government. And third, Madam Speaker, a special reserve fund built up from the gains or losses in any financial year arising from changes in the valuation of its assets and liabilities. The Bank of Mauritius Act has it that the Special Reserve Fund can only be used for monetary purposes. It is proposed in the budget speech that the Bank of Mauritius Act will be amended so that the Special Reserve Fund be used to repay part of the external public debt of the countries of the country's public debt. The Special Reserve Fund stood at 13 billion in June 2018, but with a depreciation of the rupee of more than 3% as per the dollar, a depreciation of more than 3% from June 2018 to June 2019, this fund stood at 20, as the Prime Minister said, replying to the PNQ. It stood at 20 million at present. It stands at 20 billion at present, and it is proposed that 18 billion therefrom will be used to repay part of the public debt of the country. Mr. Speaker, the fact is that since March 2019, after this 3% depreciation of the rupee I've just mentioned, the fact is that since March 2019, the rupee is being made to depreciate further. The whole idea of using 18 billion rupees from the Special Reserve Fund of the Bank of Mauritius to repay part of the public debt of the country is both misguided and dangerous. It sends a wrong signal concerning the independence of the Bank of Mauritius. It will be perceived as a sign of despair. And above all, Madam Speaker, it will be tantamount to jouer à défait, because those 18 billion rupees might very well be needed in the near future to meet losses incurred to defend the rupee or to help the country face any external shock or financial crisis. Madam Speaker, it is to be noted that in the last report on Mauritius, its last report on Mauritius, the IMF wrote, I quote, "Strong and independent institutions are key to overcoming policy challenges. Staff," that is the IMF staff urge the authorities, the Mauritian authorities, staff urge the authorities to maintain strong and independent institutions to remain an attractive investment and employment destination. We know the very diplomatic language which the IMF, the World Bank, and even the MCB focus use normal when they feel that it is required for them to put that in a report. It means a lot, and it should be listened to very carefully. For the above reasons, Madam Speaker, I appeal to the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance not to go ahead with this idea, and instead to request from the IMF a study to determine the adequate level of capital that the Bank of Mauritius should maintain as a safeguard against adverse risks and without compromising its ability to carry out its statutory objectives. The coincidence has it, Madam Speaker, that in India, right now, a high-powered committee chaired by a former governor of its central bank has been carrying out just such a study for India since December 2018. Madam Speaker, it is also, in the budget speech, it is also proposed that 11 billion of government non-strategic assets be privatized over the next 2 years. 5 billion this financial year, 2019-2020, and 6 billion in 2020-2021, to reduce the level of government debt, but without any indication as to which assets we are talking about. We should be given an indication thereof, and I have strong doubts that, as in the past, this project will be realized. Madam Speaker, in the case of the sugar industry, all planters will benefit this year from a price of 25,000 rupees per ton of sugar for the first 60 tons of sugar accrued to them. And the assistance of the World Bank has been sought to provide strategic policy options for making the sugar industry sustainable. Replying to a PNQ last Tuesday, the Minister of Agriculture stated that the 25,000 rupees assistance scheme would cost 650 million rupees, and that the CB, meaning ultimately the consumers, would contribute 500 million rupees. I was a bit surprised by a comment that the leader of the opposition was satisfied that it is the CEB that will contribute. The CEB will take this out of our pockets. When the CEB makes profits, it is because what it is charging to consumers is so calculated. So let us look at the truth. Small planters must be helped. We all agree. But in this case, what I think happened is that government tried to find the money here and there. And when it couldn't find the money here and there, la solution de facilité. Get the CEB to take out of its profit, because it is making huge profits. It has made billions of profits these recent years, therefore to get it to contribute 500 million rupees. The planters deserve it, but this is going to come out of the pockets of consumers, and is going to increase the electricity tariffs by so much, or prevent a decrease by so much. Let us keep that in mind, because it can't be done every year either, Madam Speaker. The planters have not been told if this 25,000 rupees assistance scheme will be renewed next year. We have not heard a word on that, if the price of sugar remains depressed. And the fact is that the small planters have expressed their dissatisfaction with all this. Madam Speaker, in the case of the manufacturing sector, it is proposed that the Investment Support Programme, ISP, the Investment Support Programme of the Economic Development Board, be converted into a company, ISP Limited, a company with 1 billion rupees to be made available. So says the budget speech. But with only, from what I've seen, but with only not 1 billion, but 1 million being provided for in the estimates for this year, for 2019-2020, as equity. And of course, with no reference to the stimulus packages of the past. What disturbs me a lot, Madam Speaker, is what is proposed for the tourism sector, the financial sector, and the ocean blue economy, I find totally inadequate. To really have those sectors come out of the trouble they are in and move on a development path. I believe that what is proposed for these sectors is totally inadequate. What is said in the budget speech on climate change and the environment at a time when the issue has become urgent worldwide, is also not serious, Madam Speaker. We know that the so-called nationally determined contribution of Mauritius, c'est-à-dire les engagements pris par l'île Maurice vis-à-vis des Nations Unies en 2015, sont complètement dépassés. The nationally determined contribution of Mauritius at this stage proposed reducing by 30% our greenhouse gas emissions by year 2030. At a time when Finland, where a left-wing government has just taken over a few days ago, at a time when Finland has just pledged to become carbon neutral by 2035, a formidable challenge. And when the Pope on Friday, 14th June last, declared a climate emergency and appealed to governments to act urgently to keep the rise of temperature to 1.5 degrees instead of the 2 degree, not 1%, 1.5 degree instead of the 2% degree in the 2015 Paris Agreement. There is also in the budget speech no mention of the SIDS houses. SIDS, the Small Island Developing States, houses the Alliance of Small Island Developing States, in which Mauritius played a leading role in January 2005 with the UN conference held, the UN SIDS conference held in Mauritius, in the presence of the then Secretary General, Kofi Annan, leading role which unfortunately we lost after 2005. Madam Speaker, let me say a few things on the Chagos and Tromelin, Agalega and Saint-Brandon, and on Rodrigues, especially after the insane things that we heard in this House. The MMM has every reason to be very proud in regard to the Chagos, the Chagosians, and Tromelin. We started the struggle to get back the Chagos. We, the MMM, started the struggle to get back the Chagos. And we were the first to support the Chagosians here in Mauritius. We obtained that the definition of the state of Mauritius in our legislation be amended to include the Chagos and Tromelin. And I remember those who were in the 1965 Constitutional Conference, how they fought, how they resisted this move by the MMM, and we got government finally to do it, to amend the definition of our state. I remember, I won't say who it was, but I remember a senior minister saying, the UK had the right to do that. We had to fight hard to get that. That is in the case of Chagos and Tromelin. But in the case of Tromelin, Madam Speaker, until 1978, Madagascar claimed sovereignty over 5 so-called îles éparses. Now Madagascar calls the islands les îles malgaches de l'océan Indien. Rightly so. So until 1978, Madagascar claimed sovereignty over the 5, not the, but 5 so-called îles éparses, including Tromelin. I obtained in 1978 in Tananarive that Madagascar would stop claiming sovereignty over Tromelin, would support our sovereignty claim over Tromelin. And that is why, Madam Speaker, in 1979, Madagascar got the UN General Assembly to adopt a resolution supporting the sovereignty of Madagascar over the so-called îles éparses, excluding Tromelin. And since then, Madagascar supports our claim of sovereignty over Tromlin, and we support the claim of Madagascar over the 4 other islands, that is Europa, Basasta India, Juan de Nova, and Les Glorieuses. Madam Speaker, we hope that the UK will soon open discussions with Mauritius to implement the recent International Court of Justice ruling on the Chagos. But again, once more, we request that the present government make clear what is its stand on Tromlin. We, for our part, we wish that France agrees to discuss the sovereignty issue. We should leave behind the so-called cogestion proposed in the past. France, we hope, will agree to discuss with Mauritius sovereignty over Tromlin, or would agree to jointly refer the issue to the International Court of Justice for arbitration. And speaking in the case of Agalega, we give all our support to our compatriots in Agalega and will be, with many others, ever vigilant. It is regrettable, Madam Speaker, that in the budget speech, no mention at all is made to Saint-Brandon, part of our archipelago state. We are entitled to know what is the situation there these days, because the dégâts irréparables can be caused to Saint-Brandon if we are not concerned. I'm very worried, and therefore we are entitled to know what is the situation in Saint-Brandon these days and what is proposed for the protection and development of Saint-Brandon. In the case of Rodrigues, the MMM is rightly proud of the role we played in 2000-2005 to grant real, genuine autonomy to Rodrigues and to enshrine that autonomy in the constitution of the country. We shall always stand by our Rodriguan sisters and brothers and shall pay close attention to their reaction to the 3.8 billion rupees budget for the Rodrigues Regional Assembly provided for in this year's budget. Madam Speaker, let me say a few words on drugs and corruption. Drugs, and especially synthetic drugs, are killing our people, and especially our youth. Let me say clearly that the MMM is not satisfied at all the way the Lam Shang Ning Commission report is being implemented, or rather not implemented, and the way the Lam Shang Ning Commission report is not being followed up as it should. Concerning corruption, we are not surprised that not a word is to be found in the budget speech referring to corruption, especially considering the numerous cases of scandale and nepotism we have witnessed since the last elections. For its part, the MMM takes great pride in the fact that concerning every scandal of the recent past, be it the Medpoint affair, the Betamax case, or the ICT power, the city power, not ICT, the city power saga, the MMM has been the only party to have been on the right side of things on each and every occasion. Madam Speaker, we take note that no reference has been made in the budget speech to the law concerning the financing of political parties. at a time when money politics threatens democracy itself. I hope that when summing up, the Honourable Prime Minister and Minister of Finance will confirm that this piece of legislation will come before the next general elections. And the MMM also requests that the declaration of assets of members of Parliament be made public before the forthcoming elections, as provided for in the Declaration of Assets Act itself. Madam Speaker, let me end on the issue whether the present budget is electoralist or not, and on elections. The budget, it is a fact, contains numerous electoralist la bouche douce measures. Not surprising, since elections are coming. But the fact is that the budget contains numerous electoralist la bouche douce measures. And we all know that it is the last budget of the present government before general elections. Just as we know that the present Assembly will stand dissolved on the 22nd of December 2019 if it has not been dissolved before. The fact, I believe, Madam Speaker, the fact is that despite the cadeau la bouche douce I've just mentioned and contained in the budget, there has been something of a crisis of expectation of the government's doing. There has been something of a crisis of expectations because the government had raised expectations, especially concerning old age pensions and the PRB. Then, Madam Speaker, there are the faux cadeaux. In the case of the decrease in the price of diesel and l'essence, the population knows that excise duty, now being brought down, was increased massively in 2015, disguised as a fourfold increase in the levy charged by the State Trading Corporation on diesel and essence. And in the case of the decrease in the price of cooking gas, and to the so-called 1.7 billion subsidy on the price of rice, flour, and cooking gas, the population knows that this sum is in fact collected by the STC through levies again on the price of diesel and l'essence. This is collected by the STC from the consumers and traveling public. In the case of the 6,000 housing units to be constructed on 16 sites over the next 3 years, in high-rise buildings with a maximum of 6 floors, again, the population knows that only 1,283 housing units have been constructed and delivered by the present government. And that those 6,000 units are supposed to be built on a PPP basis by the private sector. And we know what will be the result of that, Madam Speaker. Finally, Madam Speaker, there are the déçus et oubliés of the budget, especially the fishermen, the artists, the taxi operators, and the SMEs. Madam Speaker, this is the last budget of the present government. As per the Constitution, the present Assembly will stand dissolved on 22nd December 2018. That is 5 years as from the first sitting of the Assembly after the last general election. So the present Assembly will stand dissolved on 22nd December 2019 if it is not dissolved before. But now, government has had the nomination day and polling day for a by-election in constituency number 7, Piton-Rivière-du-Rempart, scheduled for 17th of August and 13th of November. If there is a by-election and a candidate is elected on 13th of November, he or she will stop being a member of the Legislative Assembly a month later, on 22nd December. This would be ridiculous, but also a waste of precious public funds. Madam Speaker, hardly anyone believes that there will be a by-election. But it is wrong. I believe it is wrong for government to have the whole population to live in such incertitude. And it is bad for the economy, for investment and for the economy in general. The best thing, I believe, as a patriot, as a Mauritian, the best thing for the country and its economy would be to have general elections before the end of the year. That is, before the date 22nd of December, when the Assembly will stand dissolved, whatever else happens. If government really thinks that this budget has been well received by the population, it should have no problem with general elections being held before the end of the year. This is in the democratic spirit. This is in line with the mandate, the 5-year mandate, which government obtained in the last general election. So if indeed government really thinks that this budget has been well received by the population, it should have no problem with general elections being held before the end of the year, instead of imposing upon the country, as from 22nd December, a caretaker government without a parliament. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I suspend this